Thank you for that, Omnia. She was going to have a trouble after the event if she didn't like request you to clap for me. But everything is at peace right now. So thank you so much for the clap as well. So I feel like we are all energized and good now for the afternoon sessions after the lunch break. Um, so basically, I think to frame this session on children and youth rights in environmental governance, it's just important to go through some of few reflections. I don't really have a written speech for this, but I can speak from the heart because it is now a hackneyed cliche that youth and children need to be meaningfully engaged in global environmental policy processes and actually in policy processes at all levels. But it's also important to highlight that this need to be quite ingrained in the policy frameworks. And that's why it is very important time during this upcoming YEA-7 that the government of Sri Lanka has actually tabled as a resolution, a draft resolution on enhancing the meaningful participation of children and youth in environmental and climate change action. This is quite a very positive step towards a meaningful youth engagement that we keep on advocating for. Looking back in 1992, during the Rio Earth Summit in Brazil, when Maurice Strong, who was the first executive director of UNEP, was serving as the Secretary General of that important meeting, he managed to ensure that we got meaningful participation of children and youth in the Agenda 21 document of that we call like Rio Declaration or something like that. And if you look at it, especially in chapter 25, you'll see how governments are actually urged to include young people and children within their decision making, especially when you talk about global environmental policy making. Then fast forward, we see in 2003 here at UNEP, a Tunza strategy that we call Tunza Youth Strategy for UNEP, that then structured youth engagement, particularly through the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. And with the evolution that we've seen over time, we've seen our common agenda report by Secretary General of UN. We've seen the Pact for the Future, where we got the Declaration for Future Generations, categorically highlighting the principles of meaningful youth engagement. And this session actually goes deep into unpacking how this needs to look like. Of course, children and youth rights in environmental governance being quite observed. But again, also opening room for us to have a very interactive session, looking ahead where we are having a resolution table for UNEA to champion for meaningful youth participation of youth and children in environmental and climate change action. So without going deep into what our panelists have actually prepared for us to share with us, I was just putting out there for us to provoke our thoughts in what is coming ahead, looking at also the evolution of the Youth Environment Assembly and how it needs to be recognized. It's actually in the place order of the ministerial declaration of this UNEA. And these are very important steps that we are seeing in our own time. It's not about now requesting a seat at the table, or rather how we call it metaphorically, but it's about how we do with our voice when we are already in the decision-making places. So thank you so much. And over to you, my colleague Omnia, and thanks so much. You can clap again if you want. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Alphonse. And excuse me, I didn't introduce you because I think you're very famous. But Alphonse is my co-regional focal point of Africa region with the Children and Youth Major Group to UNEP. He's actually the person behind supporting ground participation of lots of Kenyan youth in the CPR, OECPRs, and so on. So to follow up on what my brother Alphonse have said, environmental governance fundamentally determines the rights of well-being of our children and youth, yet their voices remain underrepresented in the process of multilateralism. Despite strong normative frameworks such as the UN Convention of Rights of the Child, the Paris Agreement, and the SDGs, children and youth remain very underrepresented. And that's why at the Children and Youth Major Group, we have a bit of a historic that now we are hosting our third Youth Environmental Assembly, which is in the first edition was a very small room with few youth, but now we are more than 800 and we're closing to 1,000 youth present, so we should just applaud ourselves for this. And actually, this event is very important because it's in the margins of the first draft resolution on meaningful inclusion of children and youth on environmental governance, thanks to the government of Sri Lanka. And I'm very honored to have with us the Deputy Permanent Representatives of Sri Lanka, Ms. Rovini De Silva, and to remind that Sri Lanka actually hosted our Asia Pacific Youth Environment Forum in 2023. So this just reminds us about their stewardship in youth and children engagement. So Ms. Rovini, we would love to hear from you about how you were motivated to give this draft resolutions, the lessons from Sri Lanka on including youth and children in advisory mechanism, and also what are the concrete steps that we can take from this UNEA and from member states to institutionalize intergenerational participation.
Thank you. Karibu, Kenya. Sri Lanka is honored to present this intervention in support of our draft resolution on enhancing the meaningful participation of children and youth in environmental governance. At the outset, it is with deep concern that we note the severe impacts of Cyclone Ditwa, which struck Sri Lanka on 27th November 2025, bringing torrential rainfall and triggering widespread floods and landslides. As of today, the death toll has risen to at least 123, with many individuals still reported missing. Hundreds of homes have been damaged or destroyed, and the government has been compelled to close offices and schools nationwide in response to the scale of the disaster. This tragic situation underscores, with unmistakable clarity, the urgency and importance of this resolution. The impacts of Cyclone Ditwa demonstrate how children and youth are disproportionately affected by climate-induced disasters, yet often have the least influence over the decisions that shape their future. Strengthening their participation in environmental governance is not merely a procedural consideration. It is an essential step toward building more resilient, equitable, and forward-looking climate responses. By institutionalizing their voices within multilateral processes, member states can ensure their environmental policies are informed by those who will inherit both the risks and the responsibilities of a rapidly changing planet. Despite progress, youth participation in environmental governance remains inconsistent, under-resourced, and often symbolic. Around the world, children and youth continue to face barriers to meaningful engagement, lack of information, limited access to decision-making spaces, financial constraints, and in some contexts, risk to safety or freedom of expression. This resolution responds to these gaps by proposing structured, rights-based, and institutionalized mechanisms for child and youth participation, consistent with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNEA mandates, and relevant governing council decisions. Our intention is not to create parallel systems, but to strengthen existing governance frameworks so that the rights and perspectives of young people are not an afterthought, but an integral component of environmental policy, implementation, and review. Sri Lanka believes that member states can significantly enhance youth inclusion by embedding child rights principles directly into their negotiation structures. First, national delegations should include youth representatives as part of formal delegations, not only as observers, but as contributors to preparatory meetings, drafting discussions, side events, and strategy sessions. Many countries have initiated youth delegate programs in climate negotiations. YEA is an ideal platform to expand this practice. Second, governments should adopt rights-based negotiating mandates referencing Articles 12 and 13 of the CRC and explicitly recognizing children's rights to participate, to access environmental information, and to have their views considered in matters affecting their future. Third, member states should institutionalize regular consultations with children and youth before and after major negotiations. These consultations must be meaningful, linked directly to the national positions submitted to UNEA and other multilateral fora. Fourth, capacity building is essential. Young people must have access to training on environmental governance, scientific literacy, and policy analysis so they can participate as full partners. This is not about giving youth a seat at the table simply to listen. It is about empowering them to speak and ensuring institutions are prepared to listen. Sri Lanka's own experience provides a number of practical insights for member states seeking to strengthen youth engagement. Across our national processes, Sri Lanka has learned that youth engagement must be structured, continuous, and multi-level. We have increasingly emphasized mechanisms such as youth councils, youth pioneers, and advisory platforms that give young people a consistent channel for policy input. We also recognize the value of education systems as gateways to environmental empowerment. Sri Lanka stresses the role of environmental literacy, community-based learning, and integration of green skills into curricula. Education builds a foundation that enables meaningful long-term engagement in policy spaces. Another lesson is the importance of regional and international engagement. Sri Lankan youth have actively contributed to dialogues in the Asia-Pacific region and to UNEP's major group for children and youth, demonstrating that digital platforms and hybrid participation can create more equitable access, especially for youth from developing countries. We have also learned that youth are most effective when treated not as symbolic participants, but as co-creators of national environmental strategies. Their contributions have informed local conservation efforts, national climate policies, and regional forums. This resolution seeks to strengthen such approaches globally. And this resolution is action-oriented and proposes a number of concrete measures at both global and national levels. For youth participation to be credible, we must guarantee that it is conducted in a manner that respects dignity, safety, and equity. Sri Lanka emphasizes the need for the following safeguards: protection from reprisals, harassments, or discrimination, ensuring young people can speak freely in policy spaces; transparent and inclusive selection processes to avoid tokenism and ensure representation of diverse backgrounds, gender, disability, indigenous identity, and geographic diversity; age-appropriate information and accessible formats, including translation and assistive technologies; child safeguarding protocols for participants under 18, including consent processes and trained protection officers. Without these safeguards, inclusion risks becoming symbolic. With them, it becomes transformative. Sri Lanka brings this resolution forward with humility, conviction, and hope. We believe that strengthening the rights and roles of children and youth is essential to achieving the goals of YEA-7 and building a resilient planet. By institutionalizing intergenerational participation, we can ensure that environmental governance is not only more inclusive, but more effective, more innovative, and more just. We therefore call upon all member states to work with us in advancing this resolution, refining it through constructive dialogue, strengthening its safeguards, and embracing the spirit of partnership it represents. Children and youth are ready to lead with us. Let us open the doors for them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. De Silva, for these very powerful words. And actually, this invites each one of us to contribute fully to the coming week and to hopefully have this resolution to commemorate this YEA-7. And a very important point is the capacity building, especially on technical and scientific capacities, because without scientists, we cannot bring up to the table powerful evidence-based data for policymakers to make them very sensitized about the issues that we are suffering from. So thank you so much once again. And when we think about children, we think about UNICEF. So I'm very happy to invite Ms. Gloria Caberia, who's the Regional Adolescent and Youth Development Lead at UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office. My question to you, Ms. Gloria, is we want to know more about UNICEF's work to integrate children's rights in environmental governance. What potential regional initiatives are you leading on this sense, and what opportunities we can, as youth and children, benefit from?
Oh, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And as you can see on the first slide, participation is embedded in the CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Children and youth are among the most vulnerable to environmental degradation. Yet, they are also the most powerful agents of change. Nothing for us without us. Children know what works in their communities, what does not work in the communities, and what could be done to make it work. So we have to remember they are the most affected, but they have some of the best solutions. UNICEF also emphasizes that environmental governance must be integrated in children's rights, youth rights, ensuring that policies uphold the best interests of the child. And who determines the best interests of the child? There are state statutes, there are laws, there are standard operating procedures. There are so many things in place to ensure that this happens. So UNICEF is guided by the CRC, and this then makes sure that we have a proper place to ensure and promote meaningful participation of adolescents, children, and youth. And I'm very happy to hear all the speakers who spoke before me mention tokenism. So often we are not very clear on what meaningful participation is. Meaningful participation is giving a young person skills, a child skills, then you give them voice. Once they have that voice, you give them space where they can put out that voice. You give them audience, somebody who listens to them. And once they put out their issues out there, they must be acted on. So we have a few principles on meaningful child and youth engagement. The first principle is every child should have the skills. She spoke to capacity development. Without skills, you'll not be able to put your voice out there. So once you have the skills, then you have voice. Once you have the voice, you're given the space. And that space requires audience. And that audience should be people who can listen and act on that which a child and a young person has brought up. And YEA-7 is one of those spaces where once children speak, once young people speak, what they brought up should be acted upon. The next slide, please. So UNICEF approach, as mentioned, is right-based. We frame it on that UNICEF, everything we do is guided by the CRC, most of us, everything we do here is rights-based, so we have to make sure that children are heard, young people are heard, their rights are met, and environmental rights, climate justice is a right. We also have to operationalize all that by embedding child rights in national environmental policies, by ensuring that we use child-sensitive indicators in our reporting, and also by ensuring that we promote cross-sectoral collaboration between ministries. We cannot work with one ministry. We have to work across ministries because to achieve what is required is need for a cross-sectoral approach. And then the principle of equity. Children and youth that are disproportionately affected by climate and pollution risks require targeted protection. And this is where, when we talk about meaningful protection, meaningful engagement, how we engage a child aged 9 is very different from how we engage a child who's aged 15, and how we engage youth at the age of 20 who are beginning maybe in their advocacy on climate, who are pushing and agitating for climate equity and climate justice, and how we work with a seasoned young person who's been doing advocacy work for the last 10 years at 35. So we have to remember whatever we do has to be age appropriate, age sensitive, and we have to co-create with the young people to ensure the meaningful participation. Next, please. Best practices for safe, meaningful, and inclusive child or youth participation. It's UNICEF's Child and Youth Councils and Child Schools toolkits. The toolkits are for capacity development. The youth councils or the youth advisory boards are to ensure that children's and youth voices are heard everywhere. They're integrated throughout, let's say, the program cycle with our line ministries and with everyone that we work with. So to ensure full presentation, full meaningful participation, we first, again, build the skills, then give them a voice, either as part of the council or to sit in the ministry or to sit in whichever platform. So have a systemized way of meaningful participation. Then have key practices that will promote inclusivity. Inclusive participation, we need to ensure there's gender balance, accessibility for children and youth with disabilities, and representation of marginalized groups. And we know some of these are often left out. If we say we've meaningfully engaged children and youth, yet we've left one strata of youth or children, then that is not meaningful engagement. We also have to make sure there are safeguarding policies. When you protect children from exploitation, tokenism in participatory processes. We also have to remember often participation involves travel, involves movement, involves children and young people not being in their homes, in the spaces where they always are comfortable. They need protection. And we cannot leave our children because we are afraid of the safeguarding that comes with them. We have to make sure we have the safeguarding measures in place at all times, especially when engaging children below the age of 18. Capacity building, that has been talked a lot about, so I will not go there again. And then feedback loops. Guarantee that children inputs are acknowledged and acted upon. We have many times engaged children and young people and done nothing about it. And the next time you go to them, they are disillusioned. We talk, we share our issues, but nothing is done about it. So we have to make sure that if we are not able to act on what we get from children, what they recommend or their asks, kindly let us give them feedback on why we did not act, when we might act, when we could act, and how we will act when we act. Let us not go quiet on asks, recommendations, and inputs by children and young people. Next, please. I have mentioned this already. This is what underpins what meaningful participation looks like. There's space, there's voice, there's audience, and there's influence. Once you give a young person a space to share and air their views, give them that voice, which is empowered, have been taught on what it means to be a climate justice advocate. I know what environmental degradation is. I will be able to confidently talk to whoever, presidents, politicians, whoever is at the table. I'll take up the space and my seat at the table with confidence, and I will be able to influence. I will be able to know what is the difference between activism, advocacy, awareness raising, and anything else that I'm involved in as a child or a young person. So whenever we are involving children and youth, these are the key things to make sure we are not being tokenistic, we are meaningfully engaging them. The next one is how we strengthen accountability for young people and children environmental rights. This has 3 areas where we have the national systems. I've already mentioned that. We have best interest principle, which is applied consistently in environmental decision-making, ensuring children and youth needs are prioritized. And then the role of civil society, youth-led organizations and women-led organizations. If we really want to localize change, if we want to have young people and children as the leaders of agents of change, it has to be done at the grassroots level. It has to involve youth and women-led organizations, and remembering adolescent girls and young women-led organizations. We have amazing eco-feminists in the region who've been doing great work educating their peers, calling for change, and speaking to governments and ministries about climate justice. So we have to involve others. What opportunities then do we have at YEA-7? First one is anchoring child rights in multilateral processes. She has already spoken to that. She's already shown us how that will be done. We can advocate for UNEA resolutions that explicitly reference children's rights. Thank you very much, Sri Lanka. We can promote child participation in UNEA side events and dialogues. That is happening here right now. And we can encourage states to adopt child-sensitive environmental indicators in UNEP reporting. I've seen a bit of that, and I know that happens also with UNICEF. The next one is strategic leveraging. How does UNEA offer a platform to mainstream child rights into global environmental and governance, aligning with SDGs, CRCs, and any other instrument that we have there? And she very clearly spoke to that too. So as we edit or we work on this resolution, we can see how some of these things come in to ensure that we are leveraging on all the resources and the asset that children and young people are. Then partnerships. We need to build coalitions between governments, UN agencies, youth movements, and institutionalized child and youth participation. And I have seen this with a lot of South-to-South youth-led movements that are really doing amazing work, that are empowering younger youth and children through to peer-to-peer approaches that are helping strengthen, increase knowledge, and give young children a voice to become the youth leading change in the days to come. So last but not least, these are some of the implementing strategies that we use at UNICEF to enhance meaningful youth participation, meaningful child participation, which is influencing government policies, legislation, and financing. We can talk so much about structured platforms for meaningful participation, but without budget, they will be of no use. So we have to ensure that the policies, legislation, and financing is in place. We have to foster cross-sectoral and multi-sectoral programming, interministerial, inter-agencies, inter-CSOs. We all have to work together to ensure this happens. Sri Lanka has spoken to innovation with and for young people. This is innovation that is designed, led, implemented by young people. Then we have to generate and utilize data. We are a people who really sometimes have the evidence, but document the evidence. How do we show what works, what does not work if we're not documenting it? So we have to remember documentation and evidence generation. Then improve on children and young people responsive service delivery. I've heard so many times across the system where young people don't take up on the services available because they are not with the times. They are not appropriate for them. They do not speak the language that they speak. The service provider does not understand why the young person behaves the way they behave. We've seen that with Gen Z movements across the world. So we have to make sure that our services speak to the young people and the needs of young people are delivered in a way that speaks and is appropriate for young people. Last but not least, leverage partnerships for results. Partnership at all levels, across all levels. And to end this, a call to action. We must recognize that safeguarding the environment is inseparable from safeguarding children's rights and youth rights. And one of the ways to safeguard children's rights and young people's rights is to meaningfully engage them in everything that involves them across the program cycles. Not when it suits us, not when our donors are visiting, not when we want to take pictures, and not when we want to show that we are actually involving them, but meaningfully engaging them, listening to them, and taking up what they say. Our vision is a world where every child grows up in a safe, healthy, and sustainable environment. And for you as a takeaway, how can YEA-7 strengthen children's voices in global environmental governance? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gloria, and you have mentioned so many very interesting things. And among them is there is no meaningful participation without offering a safe platform, very inclusive, because we shouldn't just ignore people, children or youth with disability, with neurodiversity, those who are in refugee status, etc. And I would use a quick change of hat as a former UNICEF Climate Action Champion, that UNICEF develops a lot of tools that you can readily use on advocacy, on different topics. I work with UNICEF on the children and health rights, so you might all check that out in UNICEF websites. And I thank you once again. And staying on UNICEF Vice, I would invite to the floor our child speaker, Francisco Vera. So Francisco is a UNICEF child champion, and we are very proud and honored to have him to ensure that this side event speaks for itself and empower youth. But we have some surprises in the end of the panel. So Francisco, I have two questions for you. Why and how children must be part of environmental decision making? And from your experience as a child activist, what are the biggest challenges that you think children face when engaging in global environmental spaces? So
No,
over to you.
thank you very much, Umia, for the opportunity. First of all, allow me to congratulate you for this space. I'm really, really happy and excited because I have been for a long time engaged like in decision-making processes, especially related to the UNFCCC Convention and to the climate decisions, and also nationally. But let me tell you that I have never seen such a great addressment of the children rights issues in the framework of environmental challenges, such as climate change, environmental degradation, in general, the triple planetary crisis, no? As we know. So congratulations, very happy for that actually. Well, we have already heard why, no? We know that children are at the front lines of many crises, not just of the environmental issues. Of course, UNICEF in fact has a very interesting research on that. The risk index of children published like 2-3 years ago. I don't remember how long. And it talks about this concept of negative feedback, basically. No, it's not just the environmental challenges, it's actually all the issues that our society is facing right now. As you know, we are facing one of the highest levels of violence since the end of the Second World War. More than 56 armed conflicts active in many parts and regions of our world, following the data of the Global Peace Index. We have huge socioeconomic inequalities that fit precisely the vulnerability of children. And all this together is, of course, sinking the future and present of children. So it's not just from an ecological perspective, but actually from a multi-sectorial perspective that we must to mainstream children rights in all decisions, basically. But here it comes the most important thing. Regardless the vulnerability or the affectation of children in an armed conflict, in a climate disaster, in any crisis, actually children should be included, because it's very nice to precisely recognize, it's very nice and actually absolutely important actually to recognize the unique and disproportionate vulnerabilities of children. no, the grade of exposure that exposition they have to the affectations, to the consequences, the negative impacts of the crisis. But we should actually transcend, and actually I'm seeing it right here, we should transcend those narratives and precisely let aside the paternalistic view of children exclusively as rights holders, but actually we are human rights defenders. No, we are agents of change. We are already contributing and shifting our territories, our communities, our environments, basically. So it's not just we are not just one of the main victims of the crisis, but also we are already leading the social transformations that our society requires. And I think that point is absolutely important. As many things that have already been mentioned, I would like to bring it to the table because I come from a region that is Latin America and the Caribbean, from Colombia specifically. And as you know, well, all over the world, human rights defenders are suffering terrible repression, terrible persecution, but also children human rights defender precisely, following what the reports from Global Witness, from several NGOs and civil society organizations, for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Latin America and the Caribbean is the most dangerous region for human rights defenders to speak up, to oppose, to confront extractivist economic dynamics, no, and to face the issue from the root. The root is not just the climate change and environmental degradation itself, is an economic and consumption and production model that has caused this, basically, that is polluting, that is harming our own health and the health of the planet. So this precisely confronts very directly the interests of many economic groups, no? And precisely because of that, many human rights defenders in general are killed, are threatened, exiled, persecuted, but also children. I personally, and from my movement, Guardians for Life, we're a movement, a child-led movement in Latin America, we have advocated a lot precisely for that vision, basically, for the protection and recognition, because yet many states even do not recognize us as human rights defenders, as citizens. We could talk even of the recognition of the citizenship, basically. We live today in adult crisis, basically. All decisions, as you can see, are made by adults. And I also appreciate a lot that differentiation among children and youth, because precisely when we talk about children and youth, but we do not differentiate them, we are falling in tokenism precisely. We can talk about two age groups that collect people from 0 to 35 years old. That's not meaningful, no? Children, and I appreciate that point of age appropriate engagement. Children have special levels of maturity, of autonomy, of participation, ways, manners to participate that, of course, make them also an age group that is very excluded, basically. No, so in that same resuming from what I was saying regarding the children human rights defender, I would add to the conversation simply the recognition of children as human rights defenders precisely, and the protection. We have already many regional frameworks. For example, in Latin America, we have the Escazú Agreement, no, precisely that is aimed to guarantee the access to information, to justice, and to public participation in environmental affairs, and to advocate for as decentralized and local forms of participation, of child participation as possible, that I think will allow us to engage with as many diverse children as possible, precisely because many are in marginal and rural areas that cannot access precisely to participation. Unfortunately, participation in the current system of decision-making process, in how it is designed, it has become a privilege, basically, and actually it is a right. No, so simply I would like to finalize my intervention by saying that, by congratulating you both because of the use and the rights-based approach from the GC26. Here with my colleague Kartik, we were advisors of the GC26, and I'm very happy to see that it is being implemented. So thank you, and let's go to see that even in all crises we have opportunities. And I think The planetary crisis is an opportunity to dismantle precisely all the structures that oppress us as adultcentrism. So let's go for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco, for your words. And I actually recapitulating what we said on giving the platform. I'm sure that people are very inspired from what you said, and that they are now motivated and eager to take that bold move that they have always feared or never took the chance to have. And I think this comes to a very important notion, which it changed how I am engaged. It changed how we are all here, which is mentorship. And I believe that inspiring others by the same pathway that you took will create a new generation of inspired young leaders. And I knew Kartik, who is our last speaker before Joseph, 3 years ago when he was our children's working group focal point. He was there, very motivated, eager to defend, and he also was a UN child advisor for the UN Children's Convention, and now he created his foundation, the Being Earth Foundation. So Kartik, I would love to now ask you more on the job that you've done once you moved about to the senior level. What innovations or grassroots initiatives from children and young people have shown strong potential to influence environmental governance?
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, just to check energy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, here we go. So before I say what I have to say, in the very same room during YEA-6 Youth Environment Assembly and second time, we had a children's session just after the opening of YEA, and there were even half room was not filled. So it's really great to see more faces, more young people showing up and literally being part of this dialogue and putting emphasis that why it really matters. Why it really matters to show up and mark the presence, not just to listen, not just to hear, not just to come being in the UN house, but to act upon, to build, and to contribute in one or the other way in the dialogues which we are shaping. So, a big round of applause for you guys. So, when we started, and the question, right, that what are the grassroots initiatives what children are taking up? My first question, which comes within myself, is that why children have to do so? Aren't children meant to go to school, have fun, enjoy the nature, enjoy the beauty? Why children have to take the action? Why children have to be on the street talking about climate change? Why children have to leave their schools and being into UNEP, to UNIA, to COP, or whatever space it is? Is it what we are imagining the future like? Is it what we want? We want a better future for children. So let's think about it. So, but in the current time, because there is extreme temperature, there's extreme weather, there's a lot of things which is not pleasant enough, and that makes children to come on the streets, that makes children to come out and talk that, can you hear me, that we have rights, we have right to clean and healthy environment. So the initiative which really makes sense, and not from only governance element, but really taking charge. There are children who are working on waste management. There are children working on several of the projects. And let me not just talk from the lens of child, but from the youth element as well. I'll take an example. Vikrant is in the room, Himawati is in the room from NYCC. It's again a UNICEF India flagship program, which gives a space for young people to really work on their solution. So it's not that having a space to speak and contribute to the governance process. What young people have been demanding is not just space in the room of dialogue and decision making. Young people are also demanding space in action, that young people can contribute and shape the discourse, so do and so of the action as well, right? So I think those are some of the things, but of course, as we have young people in this room, it's good to see. And also, this is the example, right? That what it takes young people, children, and youth in government governance process.
Thank you so much, Kartik. And as a continuity for your second question is, based on your work in CYMG, what's the magic formula to engage children and youth in environmental governance?
The magic formula is willingness. Let me again take names, right? We started children engagement in Asia Pacific Ministerial Forum, and it happened in Sri Lanka. That was the first time we had a children engagement planned by CYMG. And there were only 2 children in the session. And UNICEF was the partner to the event. It was in the UN compound. It was in partnership with a lot of organization. We put it a month and month to plan that event, and we had 2 children in the session. It was in the heart of the city, right? That was the willingness where we thought that we can do it, we can have it done. And that was the start, and that lead to build a momentum for Youth Environment Assembly at UNIA during UNIA 6. And again, a very incredible work by Vikrant, Zuhair, Gubin, Alphonse. In starting, I was thinking when you said to clap, right? He deserved the clap. He made sure that children have a smooth access to the UNF compound. So it's not one or the other thing. The formula is that there is a group of people who are willing to act, who are willing to do, who are willing to work, and who are willing to give their time. And this is the question I think we need to ask, that it's not only about children in this room, they are young people. Why young people are sitting and having a discussion on children? Because everyone have passed through that age group, and it really matters. Everybody have experienced the same thing. So there was a willingness from the leadership, and that's what the resolution, even we are really happy to have Sri Lanka presenting this resolution, that the willingness from the leadership, the willingness from the governing body, the decision makers, that children and youth can be a meaningful add-on to whatever we are doing. And they are. It's not they can be, but they are. So it's about recognizing and giving a formal mandate to it. So with that, I think that's the willingness we are working forward with. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Kartik. And indeed, we have to believe and give the platform. And now I'm moving on to our last speaker, who is a speaker on behalf of Brian Maina, the Kenya Youth Climate Envoy. We have with us Joseph, who is the UNEP Earth champion. From the questions that we were going to ask to Brian, since you're reporting his speech, what are the lessons from Kenya Youth Engagement Mechanism for the in the environmental space? What barriers have young people in Kenya suffered from, and what were the proposed solutions and innovations that you have came up for? And finally, what are your recommendations for government's work?
Thank you so much. So, as she mentioned, my name is Joseph Nguthiru. I am the UNEP Young Champion of the Earth, but I'm speaking here right now on behalf of Brian Maina. Most of you know him. He is the youth representative at the Climate Envoy in the Office of the President in Kenya. So I'll be reading part of what he wrote for me to read out to you. But I'll also probably put in some of my few words. So it starts. I like to share brief reflections on youth-led advocacy and intergenerational experiences from what has been done in Kenya. So the thing is, we need to transition young people from only being beneficiaries of climate policies into architects of climate positive growth. And the question that we should be asking each other here in this room and during tea breaks is how, as ZUI, as young people, can we be recognized as a source of solutions, especially for Africa, which is known as a continent of vulnerability. Because the thing is, this is my opinion, climate action must generate decent jobs for us. New industries, innovations for young people, such as renewable energy, resilient agriculture, circular economy, and so on. For example, how can we use this new boom of solar panels to create jobs? How can we use clean agriculture as a source of income? How can we train young people to make and repair electric vehicles right now? And to move from these theoretical things that are taught in school into actionable things that actually put food on the table. Going back to the speech. So the message to young people is to come with expectations, with ideas, with solutions to help shape the way forward. At the same time, institutions also carry huge responsibilities, serious structured spaces where solutions can help shape decisions. And we know that they can do better. And that's why as young people, we keep on demanding better from institutions because we know they can. But here's the good news from the office. In Kenya, we are working to reflect this vision into practice. And they're launching an initiative called the Climate Leadership Innovation Centers, the CLIC, plus the Action Lab. Both are linked to the presidency and the envoys. And the goal is to help bring youth closer to the decision making. There's a QR code that will be shared there on the screen that I'll need you to scan. For context, these are more than just accelerators and incubators. They're designed to bring your solutions to life. These are collaborations of the private and public sectors together with the government, and the Action Lab is more of the private sector funded. So this is just a matter of taking your ideas and helping them accelerate them to whatever they need to be so that they can grow and become big solutions. So young people are now included in national delegations from regional to global climate processes, and the Climate Envoy has convened youth consultations to inform these national positions in Nairobi Declaration as just transitions and other priorities. So from this work, several lessons have stood out to the government and that you will also understand. So one, proximity to decision makers matters. And when young people can engage directly with the presidency, with ministries, with negotiators, their input is more likely to influence the outcomes. Youth engagement must be based on co-designed rather than tokenism, which has also been mentioned here. And clear feedback on how youth input has been used is essential for trust. Meaningful participation requires resources because there is outreach, travel, facilitation, and so on. At the same time, the second one is that we recognize that there are significant barriers that still remain. Many young people still face high costs of participation. You know, coming here, you had to pay fares and all that to get to where you are. Complex procedures, technical languages in all these UN documents that you might not understand. Persistent power imbalances and so on. And those at the father of power, unfortunately, still remain the least represented. And these are not shortcomings of young people, but they're big design gaps in governance systems. That's why at multilateral level, especially with UNEP and MEAs, there are structured several steps that could help address these gaps. So first is the formal youth roles in national delegations and advisory bodies, and that have clear mandates, such as youth advisory councils, where our colleagues sit at, that are also linked to environmental ministries, permanent missions, fellowships, second amendments for youth in UNEP, MEA, and so on. We want young people to be able to pay bills, put food on the table, and in addition to fighting for climate change. Equally important is co-creating accountability frameworks with young people. For example, national climate scorecards that are designed with young people with regular intergenerational dialogues, digital platforms that enable young people to share data and feedback. And this accountability, in the sense, is not just about bringing blame, pointing fingers, and all that, but how can we track the progress? How can we adjust the course together? And if we are serious about youth advocacy, about bringing youth to the table, giving them a voice and so on, we must move from symbolic partnership and participation into shared leadership. This means we need to recognize youth, which is you, as strategic partners in climate positive development and well-resourced mechanisms so that we can ensure that these impacts are represented and heard in the rooms where decisions are made. Ultimately, our success, all of us, will be measured not by how young people speak at events like here right now, but by how meaningful involved we are in designing, implementing, monitoring these solutions that shape our common future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joseph, for reporting the Brian speech. And thank you also for your great work that you're doing with UNEP. And now coming to the surprise I told you about. And Kartik have said it, even last year we had minimal children representation. But this year we have very fantastic profiles that I encountered too. But I would leave 1 minute intervention for our children's speakers. So I will start with Sasha.
Hi everybody, my name is Sasha Chepkochngeng, the Green Ambassador. I am 7 years old from Kenya. I campaign for taking care of my environment, planting trees, recycling, reusing, reducing pollution. I have a book here about Sasha Young Voice for a Greener World. It's my journey on environmental conservation. Children to take care of the environment. I have a message. Children are not young to lead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now I want to give the floor to Karen.
Hi everyone. Good evening. My name is Karen Wanjiru Kimani. I'm 13 years old. I am an environmental ambassador, voice of the children, climate change champion, founder and CEO of Karen Fort Environmental Conservation Foundation. Thank you. I am the winner of the Ambassador of the United World 2025, Junior Miss United World 2025, and I just won this award 3 weeks ago.
Woo! Congrats.
So, climate change is not something we talk about as if it will happen in the future. It is happening right now. Just look around and see floods, droughts, landslides, and heat waves. As Wangari Maathai once said, it's the little things citizens do. That's what will make the difference. My little thing is planting trees. As one of the panelists said, youth and children need to take position. I fully agree. But how can we take position without funding? In my experience as a young person and as a leader of a youth-led organization, our applications are often rejected because of our age. What are you doing to ensure that children and youth can access funding without age-based barriers? My second question is, in Africa Climate Summit 1, children drafted the declaration and we forwarded to the head of states. But I feel it's not working because, one, we are not involved in climate policy. We can't get funding even to attend COP meetings. They don't include us. Children can represent themselves if we can be given a chance. My concern is, why are children neglected? For example, today, I was seated back there and I wanted to ask my question. I even stood up and raised my hands, but no one saw me. I did that 2 times. But anyway, at least I have a chance. My other question, my other thing to say is, we are not requesting, but we demand for inclusivity. In policy making, we demand our voices to be heard. Thank you.
I'm happy, Karen, that we were able to give you the floor to tell us about your work. And now, briefly for Hope.
Good evening. My name is Hope Wamboy Ocheng. I am a poet using poetry to send messages of hope, create awareness, and for entertainment. I am a flood survivor and using poetry to create awareness on climate change and also planting trees of hope with a target of 13,000 trees. My question is, many children are using art and poetry to speak for the planet, but most have no platform, networks, fundings to be heard, seen, and engaged. As a young artist, I believe our voices matter through poetry. We express the pain of our changing world and the hope for a better one. We need more spaces where child artists can be seen, supported, and included in climate action because creativity can turn climate awareness into real change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hope. And now, just one quick question from a young person, not to be age discriminatory. So, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ida. I am an environmental educator. And first of all, before I ask my question, a quick clock it to all the speakers because almost everything you said was a mic drop moment. And yes, can we all for a second? This is a youth forum, right? One of the things, or some of the things that the speakers before me, especially Ruvini and Gloria, said was around climate literacy and accessibility. And my question is, as an environmental educator, I am in charge of carrying out Wangari Maathai's legacy in the quote that she says that you cannot protect the environment unless you love it, and you cannot love it unless you know it. So as an environmental educator, part of my work is making sure children know and then love the environment. But I've experienced a lot of challenges, especially in bringing climate literacy to children in very remote areas. People in this space, you know that the farther you go, the more expensive it becomes. So my question is, many children in rural villages and indigenous communities simply do not get the chance to know the environment in the way climate education intends. What concrete steps can we take as governments? I'm really grateful that the government of Sri Lanka is here. Education systems and global partners take to ensure that climate literacy reaches even the most remote of spaces. I'm thinking, why can't climate literacy be part of the education curriculum so as math? Like, I know I would have probably been in the climate class as opposed to the math class, but that's just me. And why can't youths be given an opportunity to expand climate literacy? I know the conversation has been going on for so long. Right now, if you pitch a grant on environmental education, chances of you to get funded is like 1/10, as opposed to the one maybe researching on dolphins. But that doesn't take away from the fact that climate literacy is still inaccessible. We get to hear about it because we are in this room. What about people in the most remote of regions? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And in order for COMG not to kick me from organizing another event, we are running out of time, so I would request you to briefly give some answers to the questions. And yeah, we'll start from
I'll start with the last question. And at the national level, Sri Lanka is emphasizing on integrate environmental literacy and climate content into school curricula. And for an example, for Sri Lanka, we have free education from the youngsters up until the undergraduates. So it's free for them. So whether they are coming from the rural area or they are living in the city areas, they don't worry about the funding, and they have the free education, free access to the education. And in our curricula, we have environmental studies so that they can study up until the O levels, the ordinary levels, or if they wishes to go forward with that, they can go with the advanced level as well. So if this sort of curricula initiatives can be implemented with the other countries, we are proposing it with our draft resolution to integrate environmental literacy, green skills to the curriculas of the schools so that they can know, as you said, they have to know to love, and then only they can love and protect the environment. And for the other questions without funding as well, Sri Lanka emphasized the safeguarding proposals, and through our resolutions, we are suggesting to have fair compensation, travel support, and recognition, ensuring youth and child do not bear the financial burdens to participate so that they can be heard, as you said. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Silva. And I would ask all of us to try to talk with our member states to support the resolution, because that's going to be like our huge momentum out of YEA-7. Any brief answers before wrapping up the? Yes, Miss Gloria.
Maybe I could answer to the capacity building, the learning one. One of your answers was just next to you on the poet. One good way of passing information that is not easy to take in is through edutainment. Her poetry, dance, music, sports, whichever way it is, to the rural communities, to the local communities, using whatever form is possible. Young people and social media, so ensuring connectivity, ensuring that they have access to even a community library that is well resourced for them to be able to access that information would be a great thing to do. UNICEF, as mentioned, we have a lot of toolkits. We work with governments and curriculum developers to make sure that we have environmental education and climate as part of it. As we all know, changing a curriculum takes forever in some places. In others, it's quite easy, so it's a work in progress. We also have a program called Green Rising and GLAC, where young people could learn after school how to be either climate champions, climate involved, learn about the climate, and learn so much more. So there are many resources out there. We can share all the links so that young people know where to go. About funding, and this Alphonse knows very well, it's very difficult sometimes to send money to a 13-year-old to be able to do the work that they would like to do on climate, part of safeguarding and so many other things. However, as an entire UN, work is in progress to make sure that we have simplified ways of partnering with youth advocates, youth-led organizations, and women-led organizations. Part of our advocacy work is working with government to ensure systemized, meaningful engagement of young people is well-financed and well-resourced. Again, a work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, in one word, Francisco.
Well, thank you. Actually, on the question of finance, not only regarding participation, but in general for protecting children in the framework of the climate crisis, we know that just precisely following what UNICEF has stated, just 2.4% of the multilateral financial funds for climate action have a child focus, a child lens perspective. So that's absolutely regrettable and unacceptable. No, so just also in that sense is absolutely necessary. And in terms of education, the resilience of schools precisely to be prepared for climate disasters and early warning mechanism systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the great engagement from the floor. And I think much has been said on what meaningful youth engagement is not. But we also know what it is. So it needs really to be rights-based and safe. And our colleagues here, Gloria from UNICEF, and the representative from Sri Lanka has really spoken a lot about it. But also it needs to be institutionally mandated. And that's why COMG is here, and I hear many questions about education, of course, from you. COMG hosts capacity building sessions very periodically. So we invite you post this, let's engage, and that will bring a lot of value for you coming here. Then again, it needs to be resource, and we really don't want to talk a lot about that point because it's self-explanatory. It needs also to be transparent and promote that reciprocal accountability, but also it needs to be diverse and inclusive. And one of the things that meaningful youth engagement is about, and we actually ignore that a lot, is the visibility aspect itself. And on that point, I also want actually to know how visible we are in this space. Of course, it's the biggest youth environment assembly in history of UNEP and UNEA. So, so that's enough visibility that we are trying to bring to the table. But then we need to see how inclusive and diverse we are. Can I see the representatives, the delegates coming from Asia and Pacific region? Can we? All right, thank you. So can you see people coming from Africa region in the room? Can we see representatives from Europe in the room? Can we see people from Latin America and the Caribbean? Can we see North America representation in the room? How about West Asia? All right. All right. So this diverse, it ticks all these boxes that we are looking for, but it's not just about ticking boxes. It's steps towards meaningful youth engagement in this platform. Thank you so much, Omnia.
Thank you, Alphonse. And Alphonse was shy to say that his master's thesis, he took actually children youth major group as a case study for his work. So that's.
I have a question.
So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your engagement. Just to clarify I have been quite tired since I just flew from Morocco to here. I just arrived this morning. However, I wouldn't have missed this panel for the world. It was very energetic. I loved hearing from all of you, and would all invite you to invest and document your journeys. And that's why the comment session on the Global Youth Declaration is very important, and we count on your engagement. Thank you so much.